Our scripture today, if you want to look it up, is found in Matthew chapter 14, verses 23 through 31. Verses 23 through 31. Now I want to tell you, last week we talked about how tired Jesus was, and yet he went ahead and served anyways. The people that were there. He thought he was going to a place of rest, but he went ahead and served. So as we go into the scripture this week, you have to understand, Jesus didn't get the rest he was looking for. So what did he do? Listen to the scripture. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. He told his disciples, at that point, he said that he had told his disciples, get in that boat and go on without me. He was going up to the mountaintop. He was going to take some time alone. He was going to get his rest. So the disciples went along without Jesus. They were separated. They had become separated from Jesus. Now you have to understand at this point, Jesus needed rest then because he was still in a physical body. How many of you get tired once in a while? How many of you feel tired most of the time anymore? Jesus was exhausted. He was in a physical body. We can understand that because we live in a physical body that gets tired. And he desperately needed that one-on-one time with God, that alone time with no one else around. I know I have to unwind. Greg can come home and go right to bed and go to sleep usually. Not me. I have to sit down and unwind. It may be that after a while I zonk out a little bit sitting in my chair, but I have to do that unwinding. You know? And I think there's some of us that are that way. And Jesus was there. But while he was up in the mountains, there were those disciples. They were out on the water. And the water became terrified. Listen to this. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. They not only were on rough waters, in the dark, starting to have a little fear well up in them. But here came Jesus, and they didn't know who it was. It was the dark. They could not see very well. And they were terrified, the scripture says. Now, I want you to think about times when things happen in your life. When something happens to family members. We've been sort of hit in this church lately. Family members, our own members here in the church. We've had illness, we've had sickness, we've had a lot of things happen. And I want to tell you, we start to begin to have a little fear when these things come our way. We become anxious when we first hear about situations that are happening. And we get a little fear. They were separated from Jesus, so they had this fear anyways. Jesus wasn't there to take care of the situation. He wasn't there to calm the sea at that point. But here he came, walking on the lake, and they thought it was a ghost. But Jesus immediately assured them by saying, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." That was the part that was, I didn't look at the words that I printed out. That was the part that the girls were going to sing this morning too. All the kids were supposed to sing it, and it's in the version that we usually practice with. Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. Because Jesus is with us. When he is with us, we can allow the fear to subside. But they were out there, and there was one more fear. Here it was. Peter says, brave Peter, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got out of that boat, walked on the water, and he came towards Jesus. How many of you can swim? How many of you can't swim? How would you feel about attempting to walk on water? You're at the end of a dock and you step out on the water. The waves were not exactly calm. In some of the other Gospels, they tell us that they were rather restless. You know what? Peter took his eyes off Jesus. And he looked at those waves, and guess what happened? His faith shrunk away, and he started to sink. Here was Peter. Fear overtook him. Fear overtook him. Here was the next verse. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and he caught him and he said, You of little faith, why did you doubt? You of little faith. Peter had a fear. He started sinking. And that's what happens when the fears start coming. When situations happen in our life, perhaps we have no money to pay the bills. Perhaps it's a family member or even us that's sick. We're seeing the doctor to find out results that could be scary. We're facing situations, and we get this little bit of fear in us. And the fear beats away at our faith. And our faith dwindles sometimes when we allow fear to take control. Jesus says, do not be afraid. Take courage. It is I. I'm here. I'm here with you through everything. And when fear takes over our life, then our life is useless. I was at the Global Summit for Thursday and Friday, and the very last speaker was the one who brought a message from Scripture. And this guy, one of his jobs, he goes worldwide. He's a lawyer, and he goes worldwide, and he fights for freedom in people's lives, injustices in their lives. And he happened to be in Kenya, and he met several people there, and one young boy about 10 years ago he met was about 10 years old, or maybe 12, 13, I'm not sure at that time. Anyways, the little boy was, his parents were killed, and he was left alone to raise his little brother. Eventually, as the boy got a little bit older, terrorists came in and wanted to teach him a lesson, and they shot him and cut off his right, well, I guess it was his right arm, anyways, and left him for dead. When he did, finally, somebody took him to the hospital. I guess the police, this is terrorists by police officers in that country. But I guess they came and they chained him to the bed. And eventually this guy was able to go in and get him freed. And this boy declared that when he grew up, he was going to go to law school. He was going to become a lawyer so that he could fight for justice for his people. What the gentleman said was just within the last couple weeks now, today, there were 3 gentlemen who were killed by terrorists because of their Christian faith. And because of that, fear came about within the communities that they were working in. And fear, when it comes in, it takes over and it discourages them to the point that they start, all the courage they had to fight, they start scaling back and they start becoming afraid. But he came to the funeral, and you know who he met? The young boy was all grown up now. He did finish law school, and he is fighting for the rights. And they put it back together just within a few days, and they're going strong and marching for Christianity and marching for freedom in that country for those. And you know what I find amusing is, you know, my daughter-in-law is Kenyan. Majority of that country is Christian. It's just the few that create such a terrorist havoc in that country. So fear can be just such a stronghold to hold us back so that we will not get out there and we will not share the gospel and we will not give to people what they need to hear about Jesus Christ coming to save them from their sin. When Jesus is in it, like with the disciples, he reached down, pulled Peter up. He was saved. But without Jesus, his faith shrank away and he sunk. Jesus is still, even when we have fear, he is still looking to reach out to us. He is still looking to lift us up. Even sometimes when we're in a depression because of our fear, he is still searching us. He doesn't give up on us. We give up on him. And he still is searching. He wants us to have courage. Isn't that what he's told us? Take courage, it is I. He wants us to go out courageous. He didn't say we had to do it alone. He said he was going to be here with us.